This is the fat pig we have to put up with. My wife's sister introduced me to her rich husband's family. They all laughed until her husband saw my face. Wait, aren't you my new boss? Before I reveal everything that happened to me, download your audiobook titled Brutal Cheating Stories that shocked the world by clicking the link in the pinned comment. If you've ever walked into a room and immediately felt like the universe just set you up for the world's most elaborate practical joke, then congratulations. You and I have something in common, and I'm genuinely sorry about that. My name is Caleb Morgan, and before we get too deep into this absolute dumpster fire of a story, let me just say that I've never been the kind of guy who believes in karma, divine intervention, or any of that cosmic justice nonsense that people love to preach about on their Instagram stories between pictures of their overpriced lattes. But after what went down at the Whitmore estate on that particularly cursed Saturday evening in October, I'm starting to think maybe the universe does keep receipts after all. And apparently it's got a pretty wicked sense of humor to boot. So here's the deal. My wife Madison has this younger sister named Haley. And Haley is one of those people who managed to marry up so far that she basically needs oxygen tanks to breathe in her new tax bracket. Her husband Trent Whitmore comes from the kind of old money that makes new money look like Monopoly cash. And his family, oh boy, his family. They're the type of people who think caviar is a food group and that anyone who shops at Target is basically living in a cardboard box under a freeway overpass. You know exactly the type I'm talking about. The kind who smile with teeth so white and perfect they could probably be used as reflective road markers on the highway, and who use words like summer as a verb without a single trace of irony or shame. Anyway, Haley had been bugging Madison for weeks about this whole family dinner situation, insisting that it was absolutely crucial that I meet Trent's parents and extended family because, and I quote, "It's important for family unity and building stronger bonds." What she really meant was that the Whites wanted to size up the rest of the family tree to make sure nobody was going to embarrass them at future country club events. Madison, bless her heart, actually bought into this whole thing. Probably because she's genetically predisposed to believe the best in people. Even when those people are clearly auditioning for a reboot of Keeping Up with the... She spent the entire week leading up to this dinner giving me these increasingly desperate pep talks about being on my best behavior, which is code for please don't be yourself for 3 hours. She even bought me a new shirt. Some ridiculous Ralph Lauren thing that cost more than my first car, and kept rehearsing conversation topics with me like I was about to take the SATs. Don't talk about politics. Don't mention how much things cost. Don't tell that story about your college roommate and the ferret incident. The list went on until I started to wonder if she was just going to hire a body double to go in my place, the Whitmore estate. And yes, they actually call it an estate, because apparently Big House isn't pretentious enough, sits in this gated community that has more security checkpoints than a federal prison. We're talking guardhouses, security cameras that probably have security cameras watching them, and a gate that looks like it was designed to keep out Viking invasions. As we pulled up the driveway, which was approximately the length of a small airport runway, Madison grabbed my hand with enough force to cut off circulation and whispered, "Please, Caleb, just please." I told her I'd be a perfect gentleman, which was technically true, depending on your definition of gentleman and your tolerance for creative interpretation. The moment we walked through those massive double doors, seriously, who needs doors that big unless you're regularly hosting giraffes? I could feel the energy shift. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and suddenly realize that everyone's been talking about you and not in the wow, what a great guy kind of way. Yeah, that the foyer alone was bigger than our entire apartment. All marble floors and crystal chandeliers and the kind of furniture that looks like it would shatter if you breathed on it too hard. There must have been about 15 people milling around with champagne glasses, all dressed like they were extras in a commercial for luxury sedans. Haley came rushing over with this manic smile plastered on her face, dragging Trent behind her like a well-dressed retriever. She did the whole introduction thing, parading me around the room like I was a science project she'd reluctantly agreed to present at the school fair. "Everyone, this is my sister Madison's husband, Caleb," she announced. And I swear, I could hear the unspoken words hanging in the air. "I know. We're just as disappointed as you are." The Whitmore clan gave me these once-overs that would make TSA agents look casual, taking in my off-thoracic suit, my slightly scuffed shoes, and probably calculating my net worth down to the penny based on my watch, which I'm pretty sure they correctly identified as something I won in a radio contest back in 2012. But here's where things got interesting. We were doing the whole polite handshake rotation. You know, that awkward social ritual where everyone pretends they're happy to meet you while simultaneously trying to figure out if you're worth their time. When I ended up in front of this older woman dripping in diamonds that probably cost more than a small island nation's GDP. She looked me up and down with the kind of disdain usually reserved for people who microwave fish in the office break room. And then, in what she apparently thought was a whisper, but was actually loud enough to hear in the next county, she turned to the woman next to her and said, "So this is the fat pig we have to put up with for the evening. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I've been called worse things by better people. I've got thick skin, literally and figuratively. And I learned a long time ago that the opinion of someone whose personality is as fake as their Botox isn't worth the oxygen required to get upset about it." But what really got me wasn't the insult itself. It was the casual cruelty of it. The way she said it, like I was some kind of unfortunate stain on their designer couch that they'd just have to tolerate until the cleaning service could deal with it. Madison's hand tightened on my arm, and I could feel her mortification radiating off her in waves. Haley's face had gone completely white, probably doing mental calculations about how to spin this into something less catastrophic. But me, I just smiled. And not one of those tight, fake smiles either. I'm talking a full, genuine ear grin that probably made me look slightly unhinged. I stuck out my hand to the diamond-encrusted commentator and said loud enough for the entire foyer to hear, "Caleb Morgan, nice to meet you. Love the jewelry, by the way. Did you get that from Amazon Prime or straight from Wish.com? I only ask because I'm trying to figure out where everyone here bought their fake personalities, and I'm hoping there's some kind of bulk discount available." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a stock portfolio drop. A few people actually gasped, like I just announced I was there to repossess their Teslas. Someone's champagne glass slipped from their hand in slow motion, and I'm pretty sure I heard a string quartet stop playing in another room. The Diamond Lady's face cycled through about 17 different shades of red and purple. And Haley looked like she was seriously considering faking her own death right there in the foyer. And then, and this is the part that still makes me laugh when I think about it, people started laughing. Not everyone, mind you, but enough people that it created this weird, uncomfortable chuckle that rippled through the crowd. The kind of laugh that says, "Oh my God, I can't believe he just said that." Mixed with, I'm laughing because I don't know what else to do with just a hint of that was actually kind of funny. But I'll deny it later if asked. That's when Trent Whitmore, who'd been standing there with his champagne glass frozen halfway to his mouth, really looked at me for the first time. And I mean, really looked. Not just the cursory social glance, but the kind of look that starts at your face and then suddenly stops as recognition dawned like a particularly unwelcome sunrise. His eyes went wide. his face drained of color faster than a bathtub with the plug pulled. And he said in a voice that cracked like a teenage boy going through puberty, "Wait a minute. Hold on. Aren't you my new boss?" "Yeah, that's right. Yours truly, the fat pig they had to put up with." The guy standing in their marble foyer in his off-the-rack suit. I was Trent Whitmore's new boss, his direct supervisor, the person who would be signing off on his performance reviews, approving his vacation requests, and generally holding his entire professional future in my moderately pudgy hands. The laughter stopped faster than a Tesla on autopilot heading toward a school zone. You could practically hear everyone's sphincters tightening in perfect synchronization. It was beautiful. It was poetic. It was the kind of cosmic justice that makes you want to believe in a higher power, or at least a universe, with a really solid sense of comedic timing. And that, my friends, is how my Saturday evening went from uncomfortable family dinner to the most satisfying moment of my entire adult life in approximately 3.5 seconds. But trust me when I tell you this was just the beginning. All right. So before we get too far down this rabbit hole of shot and Freya and corporate awkwardness, let me back this truck up a bit and give you the proper context, because otherwise, you're going to think I'm just some random dude who happened to stumble into a situation that would make Shakespeare jealous of the dramatic irony. The truth is actually way better than that. And it involves a series of events so perfectly aligned that if I didn't live through it myself, I'd probably call on anyone who tried to tell me this story. So, here's the deal with my professional life, which up until this point, I kept pretty separate from my personal life because, honestly, who wants to talk about quarterly projections and supply chain logistics at family barbecues? I work well-worked past tense is complicated here as a senior project director at Langston Dynamics, which is this massive logistics and operations firm that basically makes sure things get from point A to point B without turning into a complete disaster. We're talking warehouses, distribution networks, transportation coordination, the whole 9 yards of making capitalism function smoothly. It's not glamorous. It's not sexy. And nobody's making prestige television dramas about supply chain optimization, but it pays well, and I'm good at it, which is more than most people can say about their jobs. Now, about 6 months before this dinner party disaster, the higher-ups at Langston decided they wanted to expand into new markets, which is corporate speak for we want to make more money, and we're willing to do something mildly risky to achieve that goal. They started shopping around for merger opportunities, and eventually they found Whitmore Holdings, this mid-sized but well-established company that had all the regional connections and client relationships that Langston wanted but didn't have. On paper, it was a perfect match. Langston had the operational expertise and capital. Whitmore had the market presence and established brand recognition. It was like a corporate arranged marriage, except instead of dowies, they exchanged stock options and non-compete clauses. The merger negotiations took months, which is typical for this kind of thing because lawyers need to justify their hourly rates somehow. And during that entire time, I was part of the integration planning team. We were basically figuring out how to smash 2 companies together without everything exploding like a failed chemistry experiment. I attended approximately 9 million meetings. Okay, maybe not 9 million, but definitely enough that I started having stressed dreams about PowerPoint presentations and conference room catering. And somewhere in the middle of all that corporate bureaucracy, the leadership team decided they needed someone to head up the newly merged regional operations division. This is where it gets interesting. The position they were creating was basically a super director role, overseeing operations across multiple states, managing teams from both legacy companies, and reporting directly to the C-wide executives who actually make decisions that matter. It was a huge promotion, the kind that comes with a title that sounds impressive at cocktail parties and a salary that would make my younger self weep with joy. They interviewed a bunch of internal candidates. Some external headhunters try to plant their people. And there was this whole political circus that I mostly tried to avoid because office politics gives me hives. But here's the thing about corporate promotions. Sometimes it's not about who's the most qualified or who smooths the best with upper management. Sometimes it's about who can actually do the job without setting everything on fire. And apparently, after years of quietly delivering results, while everyone else was busy taking credit for team projects and perfecting their LinkedIn headshot, I'd built up enough of a track record that when decision time came, my name was at the top of the list. My boss at the time, this guy named Gerald, who looked perpetually exhausted like he'd been running a marathon for the past 15 years, called me into his office on a Tuesday afternoon and just straight up offered me the position. No fanfare, no dramatic buildup, just congratulations. You're the new regional operations head. Try not to screw it up. I accepted immediately, obviously, because I'm not an idiot, and opportunities like this don't come around twice. Plus, the pay bump was substantial enough that Madison and I could actually start thinking about moving out of our apartment and into an actual house with a yard and everything. Like real grown-ups instead of overgrown college students playing at adult life. The official announcement went out through internal communications about 3 weeks before the Whitmore dinner party, company-wide email, updated organizational charts, the whole professional 9 yards. Everyone who needed to know knew, or at least everyone who bothered to read their emails knew. Here's where Trent Whitmore enters the picture, or rather, fails to enter it appropriately. Trent had been working in Whitmore Holdings Operations Division for about 5 years, writing on his family name and doing the bare minimum required to maintain the illusion of competence. From what I gathered during the merger process, and trust me, you learn a lot about people when you're reviewing departmental performance metrics and budget reports. He was basically the corporate equivalent of that group project member who shows up to one meeting, contributes nothing, and still expects their name on the final presentation. His department had been underperforming for 2 consecutive quarters. There were whispers about budget mismanagement and misallocated resources, and his direct reports had developed this interesting habit of routing important decisions around him entirely, which should tell you everything you need to know about his leadership capabilities. The thing is, after the merger was finalized, there was supposed to be this whole onboarding process where key personnel from both companies would meet, establish working relationships, and generally figure out how to function as one unified organization instead of 2 companies awkwardly sharing office space. There were orientation sessions scheduled, meet and greet events planned, even a corporate retreat that I managed to get excused from by claiming a prior commitment that may or may not have been entirely fictional. Trent had apparently skipped most of these events. Or maybe he attended but spent the entire time on his phone playing Candy Crush or whatever rich people do when they're pretending to pay attention. Either way, he'd completely missed the memo, literally and figuratively, about the leadership restructuring, which meant he had absolutely no idea that the guy married to his wife's sister was now positioned several rungs above him on the corporate ladder. Madison knew about my promotion, obviously because we're married and I tell her things. But she didn't know the specifics about Trent's position in the company because, honestly, why would she? It's not like we sat around discussing corporate org charts over dinner. She knew I'd gotten a big promotion. She knew it was a merged company, and she knew it involved the Whitmore name somehow. But the connection between my husband's new job and my sister's husband's family business apparently didn't click until we were standing in that marble foyer, watching Trent's face cycle through the 5 stages of professional grief. And me, I was there eating their overpriced shrimp cocktails like I was collecting tax deductions. Each jumbo shrimp representing a little moment of future leverage. Those things probably cost more per pound than some people's car payments. And I made sure to appreciate every single bite because nothing tastes quite as good as hors d'oeuvres served by people who thought they were better than you approximately 30 minutes ago. Madison kept shooting me these looks that said, "Please don't embarrass me," which I interpreted as, "Please don't be yourself," which honestly is just hurtful if you think about it too hard. The house smelled like money and marital tension. That very specific combination of expensive candles, fresh flowers, and the barely suppressed resentment that comes from people who have everything except genuine affection for each other. You could practically taste the dysfunction in the air, mixing with the scent of whatever designer fragrance Paula Whitmore had bathed in before our arrival. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. The point is, I walked into that dinner party with more power than anyone in that room realized, and I was about to watch that realization dawn on them in real time. Spoiler alert, it was glorious. So after the whole awkward foyer incident, the one where I basically told a room full of rich people that their personalities were purchased from a discount website, we eventually migrated into the dining room, which was exactly as over-the-top as you'd expect from people who think understated elegance is what happens when you only have one chandelier per room instead of two. I'm talking about a table so long you could probably land a small aircraft on it. Place settings that included more forks than any human being could reasonably need in a lifetime. And chairs that looked like they'd been stolen from a museum exhibit about European royalty. The whole setup screamed, "We have money and we need you to know it." Which honestly is just exhausting when you think about how much energy goes into maintaining that level of pretension. Madison knew about my promotion, obviously, because we're married and I tell her things. But she didn't know the specifics about Trent's position in the company because, honestly, why would she? It's not like we sat around discussing corporate org charts over dinner. She knew I'd gotten a big promotion. She knew it was a merged company, and she knew it involved the Whitmore name somehow. But the connection between my husband's new job and my sister's husband's family business apparently didn't click until we were standing in that marble foyer watching Trent's face cycle through the 5 stages of professional grief. And me, I was there eating their overpriced shrimp cocktails like I was collecting tax deductions. Each jumbo shrimp representing a little moment of future leverage. Those things probably cost more per pound than some people's car payments. And I made sure to appreciate every single bite because nothing tastes quite as good as hors d'oeuvres served by people who thought they were better than you approximately 30 minutes ago. Madison kept shooting me these looks that said, "Please don't embarrass me," which I interpreted as, "Please don't be yourself," which honestly is just hurtful if you think about it too hard. The house smelled like money and marital tension. That very specific combination of expensive candles, fresh flowers, and the barely suppressed resentment that comes from people who have everything except genuine affection for each other. You could practically taste the dysfunction in the air, mixing with the scent of whatever designer fragrance Paula Whitmore had bathed in before our arrival. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. The point is, I walked into that dinner party with more power than anyone in that room realized. And I was about to watch that realization dawn on them in real time. Spoiler alert, it was glorious. So after the whole awkward foyer incident, the one where I basically told a room full of rich people that their personalities were purchased from a discount website, we eventually migrated into the dining room, which was exactly as over-the-top as you'd expect from people who think understated elegance is what happens when you only have one chandelier per room instead of 2. I'm talking about a table. So long you could probably land a small aircraft on it. Place settings that included more forks than any human being could reasonably need in a lifetime. And chairs that looked like they'd been stolen from a museum exhibit about European royalty. The whole setup screamed, "We have money, and we need you to know it," which honestly is just exhausting when you think about how much energy goes into maintaining that level of pretension. Madison had positioned herself next to me with the kind of strategic seating arrangement usually reserved for hostage negotiations, probably figuring she could run interference if I decided to go off script again. On my other side was some cousin or nephew or distant relative of Tren. I'm going to call him Chad because he had that look. You know, the one where you can just tell his name is either Chad or maybe Bryce or possibly Hunter, who immediately launched into this monologue about his yacht that literally nobody asked about. He spent a solid 10 minutes describing the interior cabin features of this boat, like he was narrating a nature documentary, completely oblivious to the fact that I was giving him the kind of glazed-over stare that people usually reserve for DMV waiting rooms. Across from us sat Paula Whitmore, the matriarch of this whole circus, who I'd correctly identified as the source of the fat pig comment from earlier. She'd recovered from my Amazon Prime comeback with the kind of resilience that only comes from decades of practice at pretending uncomfortable things never happened. And now she was holding court like some kind of discount royalty, her jewelry catching the light from that ridiculous chandelier every time she moved. Next to her was Robert Whitmore, Trent's father, who had the look of a man who'd spent his entire life being told he was important and had never bothered to question whether that was actually true. He kept checking his phone under the table like a teenager in math class, which honestly made me like him slightly more than everyone else, even though the bar was pretty much underground at this point. The dinner itself was this elaborate multi-course affair that probably required 3 different cooking degrees to prepare, each dish arriving with more ceremony than a presidential inauguration. We're talking about food that was so artistically arranged on the plates that you felt guilty eating it, like you were destroying a tiny edible sculpture garden with every bite. The first course was some kind of soup situation that tasted like someone had liquefied a garden and added truffle oil because apparently that's what rich people do. They just add truffle oil to everything and call it gourmet. I watched as people around the table made these exaggerated sounds of appreciation like they were in a commercial for luxury bullion cubes or something. But the real entertainment wasn't the food. It was watching Paula Whitmore perform what I can only describe as a one-woman show about her connections and accomplishments. Every other sentence out of her mouth started with some variation of when we, or back when Trent met, or my personal favorite during our time with. She name-dropped with the kind of casual frequency that would make a rapper jealous, throwing out references to senators and CEOs and celebrities with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. When we dined with Senator Morrison last month, she'd say, or when Trent met Elon at that charity function and I had to physically bite my tongue to keep from asking whether she meant Elon Musk or Elon the plumber who fixed my sink last year. Because honestly, at a certain point, all the name-dropping just blends together into white noise. The thing that really got me, though, was how everyone else at the table just nodded along like this was normal conversation. Like listening to someone recite their social calendar of important people was a totally reasonable dinner activity. Chad, or possibly Bryce, would chime in occasionally with his own humble brags about golf games with venture capitalists or weekend trips to the Hamptons. And there was this other woman. I think she was Paula's sister. Or maybe just someone with a similar face and identical personality disorder, who kept talking about her daughter's acceptance to Princeton like it was breaking news that needed to be discussed at length. Meanwhile, the servers kept bringing out course after course, and I kept eating because, honestly, the food was pretty damn good, even if it came with a side of insufferable conversation. Madison barely touched her plate, too busy being mortified by association and probably calculating how quickly we could make our exit without causing an international incident. Haley, bless her social climbing heart, was doing this weird thing where she'd laugh at everything anyone said, even when it clearly wasn't funny. Like she was auditioning for the role of most agreeable person at the table and really wanted to nail the part. And through all of this, The name-dropping, the yacht stories, the casual mentions of country club memberships and vacation homes. Nobody really acknowledged my existence, except when they needed something. "Could you pass the bread?" someone would ask. And I'd hand it over like I was a piece of furniture that occasionally performed small tasks. It was like being a ghost, except ghosts probably get more respect, and definitely don't have to listen to stories about someone's summer in the Amalfi Coast. Then came the toast. Oh God, the toast. We were somewhere between the main course, some kind of meat that cost more than my monthly car payment, and dessert when Trent decided it was time to stand up and make a speech. He rose from his chair with his wine glass raised, and I swear the lighting in the room somehow made him look even more punchable than usual, which is really saying something. He cleared his throat with the kind of self-importance usually reserved for people about to announce the cure for cancer, and launched into this whole thing about family and togetherness and the blessing of expanding our circle. "I'd like to introduce everyone to some special guests this evening," he said, gesturing vaguely in our direction like a game show host revealing a disappointing prize. "My wonderful wife, Haley's sister Madison, and her husband." He paused here, and I could literally see his brain buffering like a cheap laptop trying to load too many programs at once. He didn't know my name. Or maybe he knew it, but couldn't be bothered to remember it. Either way, the pause stretched out long enough to become uncomfortable, and I watched as Haley's face turned this interesting shade of red that probably doesn't exist in nature. "Caleb," I supplied helpfully, raising my own glass with a smile that was approximately 70% genuine and 30% malicious glee. "Right. Yes, Caleb." Trent continued like he'd known it all along and was just testing everyone's attention span. "Haley's sister's husband, not my brother-in-law, not Madison's husband. Caleb, just Haley's sister's husband. Like I was a package deal that came attached to someone more important, a footnote in someone else's story." The table raised their glasses in this half-hearted gesture that suggested they'd all rather be literally anywhere else. And that's when it happened. As everyone was taking their obligatory sip of wine that probably cost more than my first car, I heard it again. That stage whisper that rich people seem to think is actually quiet. It came from somewhere down the table. Maybe from Paula, or maybe from her personality twin sister. But the words carried clear as day in that moment of relative quiet. "Well, at least we'll only have to put up with the fat pig for one evening." The comment was met with this ripple of laughter that people tried to disguise as coughs or clearing throats. But I heard it. Madison heard it. Hell, probably the servants in the kitchen heard it. And you know what? I laughed too. I actually laughed. This genuine burst of amusement that caught everyone off guard because I knew something they didn't. I knew that this wasn't going to be just one evening. This was going to be a whole lot of evenings, a whole lot of meetings, a whole lot of performance reviews and budget approvals and corporate decisions that would affect every single person at this table who was currently having a good chuckle at my expense. See, that morning, literally hours before this dinner party, I'd received an email from corporate confirming the final details of the merger integration. All the paperwork had been finalized. All the positions had been officially assigned, and my first executive order as regional operations head had been to review and approve the performance evaluations for all departments under my purview. And guess whose department was at the very top of that list? Flagged with more red markers than a teacher's edition of a failing student's essay. That's right, Trent Whitmore's division, complete with budget discrepancies, missed targets, and enough documented complaints to fill a filing cabinet. So I laughed because karma wasn't just coming. It was already here, sitting at the table, eating their expensive food, and waiting for dessert. The thing about watching someone's entire world crumble in real time is that it happens in these weird slow-motion moments. Like you're watching a nature documentary about the collapse of an ecosystem, except instead of glaciers melting, it's just some dude's ego dissolving into a puddle of expensive wine and regret. Trent had gone back to his seat after that stellar toast, where he couldn't remember my name. And he was doing this thing where he kept glancing at me out of the corner of his eye, like his brain was trying to process something. But the CPU was running on Windows Vista, and nothing was loading properly. I could practically see the little buffering while spinning in his head. Meanwhile, I was having the time of my life, just existing in this space. Watching the gears turn behind everyone's eyes as they tried to figure out why I seemed so completely unbothered by their casual cruelty. Madison had finally started eating, probably figuring that if this whole evening was going to be a disaster anyway, she might as well enjoy the Filt Minan that cost more than our grocery budget for a month. Smart woman, my wife. She'd also started on her second glass of wine, which was either a very good sign or a very bad sign, depending on your perspective and your familiarity with Madison's alcohol tolerance levels. I pulled out my phone under the table. Yeah, I know, rude. But Robert Whitmore had been doing it all night, so I figured the etiquette rules were more like guidelines at this point, and shot off a quick text to Jennifer in HR. Jennifer's one of those people who actually reads emails and responds to them in a timely manner, which makes her basically a unicorn in the corporate world. I asked her to confirm the status of Trent Whitmore's department performance review just to make sure I had my facts straight before this whole situation escalated from awkward dinner party to career-defining moment of glory. She responded within 30 seconds. Bless her efficient soul with a confirmation that, yes, the review had been flagged. Yes, it was waiting for my approval. And yes, it was not looking great, to put it mildly. Her words, not mine, but I appreciated the diplomatic understatement. Dessert arrived with the kind of fanfare usually reserved for visiting dignitaries. Each played a work of art that probably required a degree from a French culinary institute to create. It was some kind of chocolate situation with gold leaf on it, because apparently eating actual gold is what happens when you have too much money and not enough common sense. I watched as Chad, definitely Chad, tried to take an Instagram-worthy photo of his dessert from multiple angles, complete with that awkward overhead shot that requires you to half stand from your chair like you're doing some kind of weird yoga pose. That's when Robert Whitmore decided to acknowledge my existence beyond my ability to pass bread. He set down his phone, miracle of miracles, and actually looked at me like I was a human being instead of a furniture piece that occasionally needed feeding. "So, Caleb," he said. And I appreciated that he at least got my name right on the first try. "What is it that you do for work?" Haley mentioned something about logistics, I believe. The table went quiet in that way that suggests everyone's pretending not to listen while actually listening so hard their ears might start bleeding from the effort. Madison's hand found my knee under the table and squeezed it with the kind of pressure that could crack walnuts, which I interpreted as either, "Please don't make this worse," or, "Oh God, here we go," or possibly both simultaneously. I smiled at Robert, one of those genuine smiles that probably made me look slightly deranged, and said, "Yeah, I work in logistics and operations. Specifically, I'm with Langston Dynamics." I paused here just for a beat, letting that name settle into the air like dust particles in sunlight. You might have heard of our recent merger partner, Whitmore Holdings. The recognition didn't hit everyone at once. It was more like a wave starting with Robert, whose eyes went from casually interested to suddenly very focused, like someone had just adjusted the prescription on his mental glasses. His fork, which had been heading toward his mouth with a piece of that golden-encrusted chocolate nonsense, just stopped midair. frozen in a moment that would have made a great sculpture if sculptures could capture the essence of dawning horror. "Wait," Robert said slowly, setting down his fork with the careful precision of someone defusing a bomb. "You work for Whitmore Holdings?" "Well, technically I work for the merged entity now," I clarified, because accuracy is important, especially in moments of maximum dramatic irony. Langston Whitmore Group, as of about 3 weeks ago when the acquisition finalized. I manage operations for the whole regional division. I took a bite of my dessert, chewed thoughtfully, and added, "This chocolate's really good, by the way. Is that actual gold? Because I've always wondered if eating gold changes the taste, or if it's purely for the aesthetic flex." Paula had gone completely still, which was remarkable considering she'd been in perpetual motion all evening, gesturing with her hands and adjusting her jewelry, and generally behaving like someone who'd consumed their body weight in espresso. The sister, or possibly clone next to her, had her mouth hanging open slightly, which wasn't a good look on anyone, but was particularly unflattering when combined with the shock-frozen expression she was sporting. Robert's brain was clearly working overtime, connecting dots faster than a conspiracy theorist with a corkboard and too much free time. "Hold on," he said, and his voice had taken on this quality that suggested he really didn't want the answer to the question he was about to ask. You're not the Caleb Morgan, are you?" The new regional operations head that corporate announced. "Guilty as charged," I said cheerfully, raising my wine glass in a mock toast. Although I prefer to think of myself as just a guy trying to make supply chains run smoothly and keep quarterly projections on track. But yeah, that's me. Regional operations head, merger integration specialist, and apparently, according to someone at this table, a fat pig that people have to put up with. Though I gotta say, the pig thing isn't on my business cards. Maybe I should add it. Could be a good conversation starter at networking events. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that has weight and texture. The kind you could probably bottle and sell as an awkwardness supplement. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. Outside, a bird chirped. In the kitchen, I'm pretty sure a servant dropped something that shattered, which felt appropriate for the moment. Trent's face had gone through so many color changes in the past 30 seconds that he was basically a human mood ring, cycling from normal to pale to red to something approaching purple, before finally settling on a shade of gray that suggested his soul had left his body and was currently reconsidering its life choices from somewhere near the chandelier. His mouth opened and closed a few times like a fish that had suddenly found itself on dry land and was really confused about how it got there. "But you," I thought, "we never." Trent stammered, which was a sentence structure that really captured the essence of his current mental state. "Met during the integration meetings." I finished for him. "Yeah, you missed those. All 4 of them, actually. I noticed your name on the attendance sheets. Or rather, I noticed your name's consistent absence from the attendance sheets. Also missed the company-wide email announcement, the org chart update, and I think there was a newsletter that mentioned it. Though to be fair, nobody really reads those corporate newsletters, so I can't judge you too hard on that one." Robert had recovered enough to speak, though his voice had taken on the quality of someone who just realized they'd bet their life savings on the wrong horse. "Caleb, I had no idea. We had no idea that your son's new boss was the fat pig you'd be putting up with this evening," I said, keeping my tone light and conversational like we were discussing the weather or sports scores, instead of the fact that I now held Trent's professional future in my moderately sized hands. "Yeah, I got that impression. Don't worry about it, though. I'm used to flying under the radar. It's actually kind of my thing. I heard what I'm 90% sure was thunder rumbling in the distance. which felt like either divine timing or the universe's way of adding a dramatic soundtrack to this moment. Or maybe it was just Trent's ego collapsing with enough force to register on the RTOR scale. Either way, it was perfect. Paula finally found her voice, though it came out about 3 octaves higher than her usual imperious tone. "Trent, darling, did you know about this?" Trent shook his head slowly, still looking like someone had replaced his brain with cotton candy and told him to solve calculus problems. "And me?" I just smiled and took another bite of my gold-covered dessert, because revenge tastes even better when it's served with chocolate and precious metals. You know that scene in every disaster movie where the earthquake hits and everything's shaking and people are screaming, and then suddenly everything goes still and quiet, and everyone's just standing there trying to process what the hell just happened. That's basically what the Whitmore dining room felt like for a solid 30 seconds after my little revelation. Except instead of rubble and destruction, we just had really expensive china and the shattered remains of about 15 people's egos scattered across that absurdly long table. The energy shift was so dramatic and so immediate that if I'd had one of those fancy weather station instruments, I'm pretty sure it would have registered as a significant atmospheric event. It was like watching dominoes fall in reverse. Except the dominoes were people's attitudes, and they were falling upward into my lap, along with their sudden, desperate need to be on my good side. Paula Whitmore, who approximately 10 minutes ago had been calling me a pig with the casual cruelty of someone commenting on the weather, suddenly transformed into what I can only describe as a malfunctioning customer service robot programmed to deliver maximum friendliness. "Well, Caleb," she said, and I want you to understand that she said my name with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious figures or people who can get you good tickets to sold-out concerts. "We had no idea we were hosting someone of your caliber this evening. If we'd known, we certainly would have." She trailed off here, probably realizing that finishing that sentence would require her to acknowledge that she'd been a terrible human being. And that kind of self-awareness clearly wasn't in her programming. "Would have what?" I asked, because I'm not above making people squirm when they deserve it. And Paula Whitmore definitely deserved it. Been nicer. Use my actual name. Maybe not call me a fat pig with an earshot. I'm curious where you're going with this, Paula. Using her first name felt powerful, like I was breaking some kind of unspoken rule about social hierarchy, and I watched her physically recoil slightly at the familiarity. Robert jumped in, bless his damage control attempting heart, with this forced laugh that sounded like a car engine trying to turn over in sub-zero temperatures. Just a misunderstanding, I'm sure. Family dinners, you know how they can be. Everyone's trying to be funny. Sometimes jokes don't land quite right. He was doing this thing with his hands, gesturing vaguely like he could physically wave away the awkwardness. And honestly, it might have worked on someone who gave a damn about making this comfortable for him. But that person was not me, right? "Jokes," I said, nodding slowly. "Super funny joke. Real comedy gold." I laughed so hard internally that I think I pulled something. I took a sip of wine, which at this point was basically just liquid courage and vindication mixed together, and watched as everyone tried to figure out how to navigate this new reality where the person they've been mocking was suddenly the most important person in the room. The really fascinating thing, and I mean this in the way that watching a car crash in slow motion is fascinating, was seeing how quickly everyone's behavior changed. Chad, I was read his name is actually Chad, suddenly wanted to know my thoughts on market trends and operational efficiency. The clone sister started asking me about my background and education, with the kind of interest you'd show to a celebrity you randomly encountered at Starbucks. Even the servers seemed to be refilling my wine glass more attentively, like they'd gotten a memo about the power shift and were adjusting their strategy accordingly. But the best part, the absolute cherry on top of this shot in Freud Sunday, was watching everyone suddenly become connoisseurs when it came to anything I said. I made a comment about how the dessert was so rich it probably had its own offshore tax haven. And the entire table erupted like I just delivered the closing bit at a Netflix comedy special. Paula laughed so hard she had to dab at her eyes with her napkin. Those same eyes that had looked at me with disgust an hour ago were now tearing up with mirth at my moderately clever financial humor. It was beautiful and disturbing in equal measure. Haley had started calling me Mr. Morgan, which was weird on multiple levels considering I'd known her since she was dating Trent. And she used to call me Cal, or sometimes just Hey You when she couldn't remember my name. Now it was Mr. Morgan this and Mr. Morgan that. Like I'd suddenly sprouted a title that required formal address. Mr. Morgan, would you like more wine? Mr. Morgan, how are you finding the dessert? Mr. Morgan, please forgive my entire family for being complete to you all evening. Okay, she didn't say that last one, but it was heavily implied in her tone. Madison squeezed my hand under the table again, but this time it felt different. Less, please don't embarrass me, and more, I can't believe this is actually happening, but I'm kind of proud and also terrified. I glanced at her, and she had this expression that was trying really hard to be neutral, but kept breaking into these little smirks, like she was watching her favorite sports team score points, but didn't want to celebrate too, obviously, because we were technically at the opposing team's home stadium. And then there was Trent. Oh man. Trent, my brother-in-law's professional subordinate, had gone into what I can only describe as corporate survival mode. He'd recovered from his initial shock enough to attempt damage control, and his strategy appeared to be drowning everyone in business jargon until they forgot that he'd spent the entire evening either ignoring me or being complicit in his family's mockery. He launched into this completely unprompted speech about leveraging synergies and optimizing operational bandwidth and creating value at propositions through strategic alignment initiatives. I'm not exaggerating when I say that he used the word synergy 4 times in the same sentence. 4 times, that's not communication. That's just throwing business buzzwords at the wall and hoping something sticks long enough to make you look competent. He was talking about cross-functional integration and paradigm shifts and drilling down into granular analytics. And the whole time, I just sat there nodding along like a therapist, listening to a patient describe their completely unhinged dream sequence. That's really interesting, Trent, I said, when he finally paused to breathe. Which took longer than you'd think, because apparently panic gives you enhanced lung capacity. Those synergy optimization strategies you're talking about, we'll definitely have to review those in detail. Monday morning, maybe. I'm thinking we should sit down and go through your department's Q3 performance metrics. Really drilled down into those granular analytics you mentioned. I smiled at him, all teeth, and watched as the realization hit him that reviewing performance metrics was corporate speak for your ass is on the line. His face did that color-changing thing again, settling somewhere between ash gray and panic white. Monday, I think I might have a conflict. Oh, I'm sure we can work around it, I said cheerfully. It's important stuff. Merger integration waits for no one, right? Besides, I've been looking at some of the flagged items in your division's recent reports, and I think we really need to address some of those inconsistencies. Budget allocation concerns, missed targets, that kind of thing. Nothing major. I'm sure everything I said was technically true, but the way I said it made it clear that nothing major actually meant potentially career-ending problems that we're going to discuss in excruciating detail. Trent nodded slowly, looking like a man who'd just been told he had to give a presentation to the entire company while wearing a chicken costume. Right, of course. Monday. Looking forward to it. Fantastic, I said, raising my wine glass to new beginnings and productive Monday morning meetings. The table raised their glasses in response. Everyone wearing these forced smiles that suggested they'd rather be literally anywhere else. Paula's smile looked like it had been painted on by someone who'd only seen smiles described in writing, but never actually witnessed one in person. Robert kept glancing between me and Trent, like he was watching a tennis match where his son was losing badly. Chad had gone mercifully quiet, probably realizing that yacht stories weren't going to impress someone who now controlled significant portions of his cousin's professional future. Madison leaned over and whispered in my ear, "You're enjoying this way too much." Is there such a thing as enjoying karma too much? I whispered back, because if there is, I haven't found that limit yet. She tried to look disapproving, but couldn't quite pull it off, settling instead for a head shake that was more amused than admonishing. The fat pig, it turned out, was officially running the barn now, and everyone at this table was just figuring out what that meant for their carefully constructed social hierarchy. And honestly, it felt pretty damn good. If you've never experienced the pure, unfiltered joy of watching someone who wronged you show up to work on a Monday morning already defeated, let me tell you, it's better than coffee. Better than a surprise 3-day weekend. Better than finding $20 in your jacket pocket that you forgot about. It's the kind of satisfaction that money can't buy. Though, in this case, money was definitely a factor since I was literally signing Trent's paychecks now, which added this beautiful layer of irony to the whole situation. I got to the office at my usual time, 7:30, because I'm one of those psychopaths who actually functions in the morning. And the energy was already different. Word travels fast in corporate environments, especially when that word involves drama, power shifts, and someone getting their comeuppance in real time. I swear I could feel people watching me as I walked through the building. Not in a creepy way, but in that curious, "Oh, damn. Is that the guy who's about to wreck Trent Whitmore's career?" kind of way. A few people I'd worked with at Langston gave me these knowing nods, like we were all in on some secret that the Whitmore Holdings folks were just figuring out. My office was on the 6th floor now, corner position with windows that actually opened and everything, which was a significant upgrade from my previous cube-adjacent situation. The nameplate outside still looked too shiny and new, like it hadn't quite accepted its own existence yet. Caleb Morgan, Regional Operations Director. I ran my finger over it every time I walked past just because I could. Just because 6 months ago this would have seemed like a fever dream, and now it was my actual life. Sarah, my assistant. Yeah, I had an assistant now, which still felt weird. Had already organized my calendar for the day, and sitting right there at 9 a.m. was a meeting labeled Performance Review Discussion. T. Whitmore. She'd put it in red, which I appreciated because it showed she understood the gravity and entertainment value of what was about to go down. Sarah was in her mid-50s, had been with Whitmore Holdings for 15 years, and had seen enough corporate drama to write a Netflix series. When I'd first met her, she'd sized me up in about 3 seconds and said, "You're going to shake things up around here, aren't you?" I'd said, "Probably." And she'd responded with, "Good. This place needs it." I was reviewing some quarterly reports. The boring but necessary part of having power is actually having to do work when Sarah buzzed my intercom around 8:15. "Mr. Morgan, Trent Whitmore is here to see you. He's early, very early, and he brought coffee." I had to pause and let that sink in. Trent Whitmore, the guy who probably had servants tie his shoes, who'd spent Saturday evening either ignoring me or participating in his family's roast session. had shown up 45 minutes early to our meeting and brought coffee. The character development was happening so fast, it was giving me whiplash. "Send him in," I said, trying to keep the amusement out of my voice and failing spectacularly. The door opened, and in walked Trent. And I want you to understand that this was not the same Trent from Saturday night. Saturday, Trent had been all confidence and family money and casual cruelty. Monday, Trent looked like he'd spent the entire weekend having an existential crisis and losing the argument with himself. He was wearing a suit that was still expensive, but somehow looked less impressive. Probably because the guy inside had the posture of someone carrying the weight of their own bad decisions. His hair was perfect. Rich people hair always is. But his eyes had these dark circles that suggested sleep had been optional and anxiety had been mandatory. "Morning, Caleb," he said. And even his voice sounded different, less condescending and more like someone who just realized they'd been playing poker with someone who could see all their cards. "I brought coffee. I wasn't sure how you take it, so I got a few options." He sat down this carrier with like 4 different coffee cups on my desk, like he was making an offering to a deity he'd accidentally offended. "That's thoughtful," I said, reaching for what looked like a regular black coffee, because I'm not complicated when it comes to caffeine delivery systems. "Thanks. Have a seat." I gestured to the chairs across from my desk, and watching Trent sit down in the supplicant position, him looking up at me instead of the other way around, was satisfying in a way that probably said concerning things about my character. But I was choosing not to examine that too closely. We sat there in silence for a moment while I took a sip of coffee, which was actually pretty good. He'd gone to the expensive place, and I watched him squirm. He kept adjusting his tie, crossing and uncrossing his legs, doing everything except making eye contact. It was like watching a kid outside the principal's office, except the kid was a 30-some trust fund baby, and the principal's office had better furniture. "So," I finally said, setting down my coffee and pulling up his department's performance files on my computer, "let's talk about your division's Q3 numbers." Trent nodded so hard I thought his head might fall off. "Yes, absolutely. I've been meaning to address some of those discrepancies." "Discrepancies," I repeated, like I was testing out the word to see if it fit the situation. That's an interesting choice of vocabulary. HR flagged your department for budget mismanagement, consistent failure to meet targets, misallocated resources, and this is my personal favorite: a complaint from 6 different team members about leadership concerns. That's not discrepancies, Trent. That's a pattern. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a goldfish, trying to remember how breathing worked. "I can explain." "I'm sure you can," I said, leaning back in my chair with a kind of casual authority that I was definitely enjoying too much. But here's the thing. Explanations don't really help us at this point. We need solutions. The merger integration depends on every department pulling their weight. And right now, your division is more like dead weight tied to everyone else's ankle. I pulled up a spreadsheet that Jennifer from HR had sent me, color-coded in ways that made it very clear just how badly Trent's department had been performing. Reds and oranges everywhere, like a sunset made of professional incompetence. Your budget overruns alone are costing the company 6 figures per quarter. 6 figures, Trent. That's real money, not monopoly money from your trust fund. He flinched at that, which I noticed and filed away for future reference. "I take full responsibility," he said, which was corporate speak for. "I'm hoping if I say this enough times, you'll forget that I'm actually responsible." "Good," I said. because I'm going to need you to take that responsibility all the way to Nebraska." There was a pause, a long, beautiful pause, where I could actually see his brain trying to process what I just said, cycling through possibilities, hoping he'd misheard, praying that Nebraska was some kind of code word for a promotion. "Nebraska," he finally managed. "Nebraska," I confirmed. "We've got a struggling branch in Omaha that needs someone to lead a growth initiative. It's a great opportunity for you to really prove yourself. Show us what you can do when you're hands-on with operations, instead of just theorizing about synergies in conference rooms." I said this all with a straight face, like I was offering him a golden ticket instead of essentially exiling him to the middle of the country to fix problems that may or may not actually be fixable. "But my wife, we live here. My family can visit," I finished for him. "It's not Mars, Trent, it's Nebraska. They have airports and everything. Plus, this is really not negotiable. Consider it an opportunity to expand your skill set in a less scrutinized environment." Translation: you're either taking this reassignment or you're getting fired, and we both know which option looks better on a resume. He sat there for a solid minute, and I could practically hear the internal debate happening behind his eyes. Pride versus practicality, ego versus employment. Finally, he nodded. This defeated little head bob that suggested his soul had left the building and was probably already in Nebraska scoping out apartments. "When do I start?" he asked quietly. 2 weeks, I said. "That should give you time to transition your current responsibilities and figure out living arrangements. HR will handle the logistics." He stood up slowly like he'd aged about 20 years in the last 15 minutes and extended his hand. I shook it, maintaining eye contact, making sure he understood that this wasn't personal. Okay, it was maybe 5% personal, but it was also just business. Bad performance has consequences, and those consequences don't care about your last name or how many senators your mother has dinner with. After he left, looking like a man walking to his own funeral, my phone rang. It was Robert Whitmore, because apparently the family had a group chat where they coordinated their panic responses. "Caleb," he said, skipping all pleasantries because rich people only use manners when they're not desperate. "I heard about Trent's reassignment. Listen, I want to discuss possibly having you take over his division entirely. We need someone competent and clearly." He trailed off, probably realizing that finishing that sentence meant admitting his son was incompetent. "Happy to discuss it," I said. "Should I have Sarah set up a meeting?" "Please," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "And Caleb, about Saturday night, water under the bridge." I lied smoothly because holding grudges is exhausting and I'd already gotten my revenge. "Let's focus on moving forward." After I hung up, I sat there in my corner office drinking Trent's peace offering coffee and almost felt bad for the guy. But then I remembered being called a fat pig, and the feeling passed pretty quickly. So here's the thing about small nuclear explosions and family dynamics. They don't just create a crater and call it a day. No, they send out these ripple effects that keep spreading and spreading until everyone's been touched by the blast radius, and suddenly your phone is blowing up with angry texts and passive-aggressive voicemails that would make a daytime soap opera seems subtle by comparison. The Monday after I sent Trent to Nebraska, which I was now referring to as the Great Plains reassignment in my head because it sounded more dramatic, was when the full force of the Whitmore family meltdown really hit. The dinner invitation stopped immediately, which was honestly more of a relief than a punishment. I wasn't exactly devastated about missing out on future opportunities to eat overpriced food while being insulted in stage whispers. Madison got a text from Haley that was basically a novel-length manifesto about betrayal and family loyalty, which she read aloud to me while we were having breakfast, adding her own commentary between paragraphs. "Listen to this part," she'd say, trying not to laugh. "How could you let your husband destroy our family's harmony?" She made air quotes with her fingers, nearly spilling her coffee in the process, like we're some kind of musical group that you're managing. I'd shrugged and continued eating my cereal. The regular grocery store kind, not the artisanal small batch organic nonsense that the Whites probably had flown in from Switzerland or wherever rich people source their breakfast foods. Tell her that if their family harmony relies on treating people like garbage, then it was already out of tune. Actually, don't tell her that. That's probably too harsh. "That's exactly what I'm going to tell her," Madison said. And I watched as she typed it out word for word, hit send, and then showed me her phone with this proud smile, like she'd just won an argument at a city council meeting. This was a side of Madison I didn't see often. The side that had apparently been suppressing her true feelings about her sister's snobbish in-laws for years, and was now experiencing the sweet freedom of not giving a damn anymore. Marriage is full of surprises, and discovering that your wife has been secretly judging rich people this whole time was a pleasant one. The family group chat that Madison and Haley were part of, along with their mom, and like three cousins, turned into what can only be described as a digital battlefield. Haley had taken to posting these vague, dramatic status updates that were clearly about me, but never mentioned me by name. Like some people value power over family and money changes people, but not always for the better. I watched over Madison's shoulder as she scrolled through these, both of us eating popcorn. Literally eating popcorn because the situation had become enough of a show that it deserved snacks. "Should I respond?" Madison asked, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. "Absolutely not." I said, never interrupt someone when they're in the middle of a public meltdown. It's rude. But Haley wasn't content with passive aggression. Oh no, she went full aggression about 3 days after the Nebraska news broke. She showed up at our apartment, our modest, normal people apartment, that probably cost less per month than the Whitmore spent on fresh flowers at like $8 on a Wednesday night, dressed in athleisure where that cost more than our couch, looking like she'd either been crying or had just discovered that her favorite luxury brand was having a store closing sale. Could have been either, honestly. Madison opened the door, took one look at her sister's face, and immediately said, "I'll get the wine," which I thought showed excellent crisis management instincts. Haley stormed into our living room, actually stormed like she was auditioning for a role in a teen drama, and pointed at me with the kind of dramatic flair usually reserved for courtroom revelations in legal thrillers. "You," she said, voice shaking with either rage or the effort of maintaining this level of drama, "have single-handedly destroyed our family's harmony." I was sitting on the couch in sweatpants and an old college t-shirt that had more holes than fabric at this point, playing video games. Because that's what I do to decompress after dealing with corporate nonsense all day. I paused my game. I was in the middle of a boss fight. So this interruption better be worth it, and looked up at her with what I hoped was an appropriately concerned expression. "Haley," I said calmly, "your family's harmony was built on a foundation of looking down on people and making yourselves feel important by making others feel small. If that's harmony, then yeah, I guess I destroyed it. But honestly, that's not harmony. That's just organized cruelty with good table manners." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The family resemblance to Trent's goldfish impression was striking. "You sent my husband to Nebraska. I reassigned an underperforming employee to a position where he could either prove himself or fail in a less visible way. I corrected the fact that the underperforming employee happens to be your husband is honestly just unfortunate timing and poor performance metrics on his part. Madison returned with 3 wine glasses and a bottle because she's optimistic about conflict resolution, and handed one to Haley, who took it and immediately drank half of it in one go. "Trent is devastated," she said, her voice cracking. "His parents are furious. Do you have any idea what you've done to our family's reputation?" "Let me get this straight," I said, setting down my controller because this conversation was clearly going to take precedence over my boss fight. "You're mad at me because I held your husband accountable for actual documented failures in his job performance. Failures that were costing the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. Failures that other people's jobs were depending on. And somehow I'm the villain here because I didn't just give him a pass based on his last name." "You could have been more understanding," Haley said. But her voice had lost some of its conviction, like she was starting to realize that her argument had more holes than my t-shirt. "I could have fired him," I pointed out. "Nebraska is me being understanding. Nebraska is me giving him a chance to actually develop some real skills instead of coasting on Daddy's name. You should probably be thanking me." Honestly, that didn't go over well. Haley finished her wine, set the glass down with more force than necessary, and gave Madison this look that I'm pretty sure was supposed to convey deep, sisterly disappointment, but mostly just looked like indigestion. "I expected more from you," she said to Madison. "You're my sister, and he's my husband." Madison shot back. And I'm not going to lie, hearing her defend me like that was worth every awkward family dinner we'd ever have to skip in the future. "You know what? Your in-laws called him a pig to his face. Haley, a pig. And you just sat there. So maybe before you come into my house and start pointing fingers about family loyalty, you should think about where your loyalty was when it actually mattered." Haley left shortly after that. Dramatically, of course, slamming the door hard enough that our neighbor knocked on the wall to tell us to keep it down. Madison poured herself more wine, sat down next to me on the couch, and we sat there in silence for a minute. "That was intense," I finally said. "She'll get over it," Madison replied, "or she won't. Either way, that felt good." "I love you," I said, because sometimes that's all you can say when your wife goes to bat for you against her own sister. "I know," she said, stealing my controller and unpausing my game. "Now, teach me how to beat this boss because I want to hit something, and virtual monsters seem safer than my family right now." The real kicker came 2 days later when Robert Whitmore called me again. Not texted, not emailed, but actually called, which in the corporate world is like showing up at someone's house unannounced. It means something serious is happening. I was in my office reviewing some supply chain logistics that were somehow both boring and critical when Sarah buzzed through. "Robert Whitmore on line 1, she said. "He says it's important." I picked up already, knowing this was either going to be very good or very bad for me. "Robert, what can I do for you, Caleb?" he said. And his voice had that quality that rich people get when they're about to make you an offer they think you can't refuse. "I've been reviewing our corporate structure, talking with the board, looking at where we need to strengthen our leadership. Bottom line, we want you to take over Trent's entire division, not as a reassignment, as a consulting position. We'll keep you in your current role at Langston Whitmore, but we want your expertise dedicated to stabilizing our assets." "That's flattering," I said carefully. "Because in corporate negotiations, the first person to name a number loses. We're prepared to offer a consulting retainer." He continued, "Significant compensation for your time and expertise." We negotiated for about 20 minutes, and when we finally landed on a number, I had to physically stop myself from laughing. It was double what Trent had been making in his director position. The man who'd sat at that dinner table while his family called me a pig was now going to have his paycheck essentially funded by my consulting fees. The irony was so perfect, it was almost poetic. I accepted obviously because I'm not an idiot, and turning down that kind of money would have been financial malpractice. After I hung up, I sat there in my corner office looking out at the city and thought about karma and cosmic justice, and how sometimes the universe really does keep receipts. Then I called Madison to tell her we could finally start looking at actual houses with yards. And she screamed so loud, I had to hold the phone away from my ear. If there's one thing rich people love more than money, it's showing off their money while pretending they're being charitable. Which is why approximately 3 weeks after the Nebraska reassignment heard around the family, I found myself at the Riverside Regional Children's Hospital Charity Gala, wearing a tuxedo that I'd rented like a normal person, instead of owning one like some kind of penguin enthusiast, standing in a ballroom that was so unnecessarily fancy, it made the Whitmore dining room look like a Denny's. Madison was next to me, in a dress that she'd actually bought for this occasion. Not rented, bought, because we could afford that now, thanks to my delightful consulting retainer. And she looked absolutely stunning in a way that made me wonder what she was doing with a guy who still owned t-shirts from college with questionable stains. The gala was one of those events where tickets cost $1,000 a plate, and the food somehow manages to be both expensive and unsatisfying. Like you're eating money instead of actual sustenance. There were ice sculptures shaped like swans or maybe ducks. Honestly, at a certain level of wealth, all birds start looking the same when they're frozen, and a live orchestra playing the kind of classical music that makes you feel cultured even though you can't name a single piece they're performing. The crowd was exactly what you'd expect. Men in tuxedos that actually fit them properly. Women dripping in jewelry that could probably fund a small nation's healthcare system. And everyone air-kissing each other like they were afraid actual physical contact might transfer porn through osmosis. Madison and I were doing our standard charity gala routine, which consisted of finding the bar, getting drinks that cost more than a decent bottle of wine, but tasted like someone's interpretation of what sophistication should taste like, and people watching while pretending to be sophisticated ourselves. We'd been there maybe 20 minutes when I saw them. The Whitmores, in their natural habitat, working the room like politicians at a campaign fundraiser. Paula was wearing enough diamonds to open her own jewelry store. Robert had that look of a man who'd spent the day golfing and was still coasting on those endorphins. And trailing behind them like ducklings following their mother were Trent and Haley. Now, I'd heard through the corporate grapevine, and by grapevine, I mean Sarah, who knew everything about everyone and wasn't shy about sharing when she thought I needed to know, that Trent had been back in town for the week, handling some transition paperwork before officially relocating to Omaha. Haley had apparently been posting Instagram stories about difficult transitions and testing times with pictures of herself looking pensively out of windows, because nothing says genuine hardship like aesthetic sadness for social media engagement. Madison saw them at the same time I did, and her grip on her champagne glass tightened enough that I was genuinely concerned about breakage. "Do we flee to the bathroom?" she whispered, leaning in close enough that I could smell her perfume over the general scent of old money and salmon canopies. "Absolutely not," I said, straightening my rented bow tie with the confidence of someone who'd recently discovered they had more power than they'd realized. "We stand our ground. This is our turf now." Was it actually our turf? Debatable, but confidence is 90% of success. And I was feeling pretty damn confident, of course, because the universe has a sense of dramatic timing that would make a reality TV producer jealous. The Whitmore spotted us almost immediately. I watched as Paula's face went through this interesting journey of emotions, surprise, forced politeness, and what I'm pretty sure was mild indigestion from having to be nice to me. Robert waved. This sort of half-wave that rich people do when they're acknowledging your existence but don't want to commit too hard to the interaction. And Trent, man, Trent looked like someone had put him through a corporate washing machine cycle and hung him out to dry on the lowest self-esteem setting. They made their way over to us because of course they did, because avoiding us would have been too obvious. And this crowd thrived on maintaining appearances. And suddenly we were in this weird social standoff where everyone was smiling, but nobody's smile was reaching their eyes. It was like watching a nature documentary about predators and prey, except everyone was wearing formal wear and pretending to care about children's health care. Caleb Madison Paula said my name coming out of her mouth like she was testing out a new flavor of expensive cheese and wasn't sure if she liked it yet. How wonderful to see you here. We had no idea you were involved in this particular charity. First time, I said cheerfully, because honesty is the best policy when you're trying to make rich people uncomfortable. Madison saw the invitation and thought it would be good to support the cause. Plus, the tickets were tax deductible, which really sealed the deal for me. I'm all about that charitable write-off life. Madison elbowed me gently in the ribs, but I could see her fighting a smile. Paula's expression suggested she'd just watched me eat soup with a fork. Confused, mildly horrified, and unsure how to proceed. Well, it's certainly a worthy cause. Robert jumped in, probably trying to steer the conversation back to safe territory. We've been supporters for years. The Whitmore family has a long history of philanthropic involvement in the community. He said this like he was reciting from a press release, which he probably was because rich people have pre-approved statements for everything. That's admirable, I said, meaning approximately 40% of it. Community involvement is important. Speaking of involvement, how's the Nebraska transition coming along? Trent, if looks could kill, Haley's glare would have dropped me right there on the ballroom floor. And honestly, the paramedics would have had a hard time determining cause of death because murdered by aggressive eye contact isn't a standard option on death certificates. Trent's face did this thing where it tried to smile and grimace simultaneously, creating this expression that looked like he was having a mild stroke or trying to solve a difficult math problem in his head. It's progressing, Trent said, which was corporate speak for, I hate everything about this situation, but I'm trying to maintain professional dignity. Then, and this is where it got really interesting, he attempted what I can only describe as a corporate comeback. He straightened up slightly, adjusted his actually owned tuxedo, and put on this smile that I'm sure he thought looked confident, but actually looked like someone had told him smiling was required, and he was fulfilling that obligation under protest. Actually, Caleb, he said, and I noticed he was using my first name now, which was a significant departure from the dinner party where he couldn't remember it at all. I was hoping we might have a chance to talk about future collaboration opportunities. I've been developing some innovative strategies for the Omaha market, and I think there might be some interesting synergies we could explore together. There it was, synergies. The word that corporate people use when they don't actually have a plan, but want to sound like they do. I had to physically stop myself from laughing, instead nodding thoughtfully like I was actually considering whatever half-baked ideas he'd probably brainstormed during his panic packing for the move. Synergies, I repeated, tasting the word. Yeah, we should definitely explore those. Here, take my card. Fancy ones with the embossed lettering that Sarah had insisted I needed because perception matters in corporate politics, and handed it to him. That's got my direct line and email. Feel free to send over any proposals you're working on. Trent took the card like it was a lifeline, his eyes lighting up with what I'm pretty sure was desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, he could work his way back into my good graces and out of Nebraska. He looked at it, and I watched as his expression changed when he read the full title: Regional Director, Langston Whitmore Group, Senior Consulting Advisor, Whitmore Holdings, Corporate Restructuring. 2 titles, he said, and his voice had gone a little flat. Yeah, your dad offered me a consulting position, I said casually, like it was no big deal, like I wasn't actively enjoying watching him realize that I now had even more authority over his professional life than before, mostly focused on operational restructuring and efficiency optimization. Actually, funny story, your department's performance metrics are part of my portfolio now. Small world, right? Paula made a sound that might have been a cough or might have been her soul trying to escape her body. Robert suddenly became very interested in his drink. Haley looked like she was mentally calculating how much it would cost to hire a hitman, then remembering that murder is illegal, then being disappointed about that fact. Oh, and Trent, I added, because I apparently can't help myself when I'm on a roll. HR still needs your updated Nebraska address for payroll purposes. Just a reminder. I know moving is chaotic and paperwork gets lost in the shuffle. Want to make sure your checks get to the right place. Madison squeezed my arm, which was her signal for, okay, you've made your point. Maybe dial it back before someone actually has a medical emergency. She smiled at the Whitmores with that perfectly polite smile that Southern women have mastered. The one that looks friendly, but is actually just weaponized courtesy. We should go find our table, she said sweetly. The auction is starting soon, and I've got my eye on that weekend getaway package. Lovely seeing you all. We excused ourselves and walked away, and I could feel their eyes on my back the entire time. As soon as we were out of earshot, Madison turned to me with this expression that was equal parts amused and exasperated. You're terrible, she said. I'm efficient, I corrected. There's a difference. You enjoyed that way too much. Is there such a thing as enjoying karma too much? I asked, echoing our earlier conversation, because I still haven't found that limit. She shook her head, but she was smiling. And we made our way to our table where the appetizers were waiting and revenge was tasting exactly like I'd imagined it would. Medium rare with a side of poetic justice and a garnish of cosmic accountability. You know that saying about how you should kill people with kindness? I've always thought that was weak advice, honestly, because kindness requires you to actually care about the other person's feelings. And frankly, I was fresh out of caring when it came to the Whitmore clan. No, I much prefer the approach of burying people with competence. Just being so good at your job that they have no choice but to respect you, even if that respect tastes like battery acid going down and makes them want to gargle bleach afterward. It's cleaner, more professional, and has the added benefit of being completely legal and morally defensible. Which is important when you're dealing with people who have enough money to hire lawyers that could argue their way out of a prison sentence handed down by God himself. In the weeks and months following what I'd started mentally referring to as the Nebraska incident, something fascinating happened in the Whitmore family social circle. And by fascinating, I mean absolutely hilarious to watch from my newly elevated position of power. See, rich people have this thing where they travel in packs like wolves, except with better dental work and worse personalities. And they all talk to each other constantly about who's up, who's down, who's making money, and who's losing it. It's like high school, except everyone's in their 40s and 50s, and the gossip can actually affect stock prices. The word got around, and I'm talking got around fast, like wildfire through a wealthy neighborhood with inadequate fire prevention measures, that I'd essentially taken over the operational oversight of Whitmore Holdings while simultaneously managing my regional director position at Langston Whitmore. people started doing that math that rich people do, where they calculate your approximate net worth based on your title and then treat you accordingly. Like human beings are just walking balance sheets that deserve respect in direct proportion to their earning potential. Suddenly, at corporate events and charity functions and those weird networking mixers that rich people have, where everyone pretends they're not just trying to figure out who can benefit their career. I wasn't just Caleb anymore. I was Mr. Morgan. Sometimes Caleb Morgan, the one who turned the Whitmore situation around once, and I swear this actually happened. Someone introduced me as the logistics genius who saved Whitmore Holdings from operational collapse, which was a dramatic interpretation of fired the incompetent guy and hired people who actually knew what they were doing. But I wasn't about to correct them because that version sounded way more impressive. The Whitmore family themselves had no choice but to play along with this new reality because the alternative was admitting that they treated their corporate savior like garbage at a dinner party, and rich people would rather die than admit they were wrong about anything. Paula Whitmore, the woman who'd called me a fat pig loud enough for the catering staff to hear, was now introducing me at events as the brilliant Mr. Morgan, who's been instrumental in our company's restructuring. She'd say it with this smile that looked like it physically hurt her face to maintain, like she was trying to pass a kidney stone made of pride and having to pretend everything was fine. Robert had fully committed to the Caleb is our golden boy narrative, probably because his board of directors had seen the quarterly reports and noticed that profits were actually up for the first time in 18 months. And they didn't care if the guy responsible had been insulted at a family dinner as long as he kept making them money. He'd started inviting me to golf outings, which I consistently declined because I don't golf, and also because spending 4 hours watching rich men hit small balls with expensive sticks sounds like my personal version of hell. But the invitations kept coming anyway, because apparently persistence is a virtue when you're trying to stay on the good side of someone who controls your family legacy. The real shift, though, the one that made me realize just how much the power dynamic had changed, came at a corporate luncheon about 4 months after the gala. It was one of those tedious afternoon events where everyone eats rubber chicken and listens to presentations about market trends while secretly checking their phones under the table. I was sitting at a table with several executives from various companies, making small talk about supply chain innovations and pretending to care about someone's opinions on blockchain technology when Paula Whitmore appeared at my elbow like a designer-clad ghost. "Mr. Morgan," she said. And I'm telling you, hearing her use that formal address was sweeter than any dessert they'd served at that dinner party. "I wanted to personally thank you for your work on the Henderson account. Robert tells me you closed that deal single-handedly. Very impressive." I looked up at her. This woman who'd spent an entire evening treating me like I was something unpleasant. She'd stepped in while wearing expensive shoes, and I smiled. Just doing my job, Paula. Though I appreciate the recognition, I used her first name deliberately, maintaining that power dynamic where she called me Mr. Morgan. But I called her Paula because sometimes the little things are the most satisfying things. She nodded, still wearing that pained smile. And then, "And this is where it got really good," she said. "You're looking well. Have you lost weight? You look different." There it was, the backhanded compliment disguised as concern. The rich person's way of acknowledging that they'd been a judgmental without actually apologizing for being a judgmental. I was about to respond with something professionally neutral when Madison, who'd been sitting next to me this whole time quietly enjoying the show, decided to make her grand entrance into the conversation. "Stress burns calories, doesn't it, dear?" Madison said, looking directly at Paula with this sweet smile that could have given someone diabetes. "All that work turning your family's company around must be quite the workout program. Maybe he should market it. The corporate restructuring diet. Lose weight while saving other people's legacies." I nearly choked on my water. The executive across from me made a sound that was half cough, half laugh, and tried to cover it by suddenly becoming very interested in his phone. Paula's face went through more color changes than a mood ring in a sauna, settling on this shade of red that suggested her blood pressure had just made an aggressive bid for the high score. "Well," Paula managed, her voice tight enough to strangle small animals, "I should go mingle. Lovely catching up." She retreated faster than a cat that had just knocked something expensive off a shelf. And as soon as she was out of earshot, Madison turned to me with this look of pure satisfaction. "Too much?" she asked. "That was perfect," I said, grabbing her hand under the table. "When did you become so savage?" "I've been taking notes from my husband," she said, squeezing back. "Turns out sarcasm is contagious. Who knew?" The thing was, Madison had genuinely changed since this whole situation started. Gone was the woman who'd spent the entire week before that dinner party coaching me on how to behave, replaced by someone who'd apparently decided that if the Whitmores were going to judge us anyway, we might as well give them something worth judging. She'd stopped apologizing for my sense of humor, stopped trying to smooth over my more pointed comments, stopped doing that thing where she'd laugh nervously and try to change the subject when I said something that made rich people uncomfortable. Just last week, we'd been at another charity event because apparently once you reach a certain income level, half your social calendar is just excuses to wear expensive clothes and pretend you care about causes. And someone had made a comment about new money versus old money, with this snooty tone that suggested new money was somehow morally inferior to inherited wealth. Before I could even respond, Madison had jumped in with, "Well, at least new money usually involves someone actually working for it, instead of just being lucky enough to pop out of the right uterus." The silence that followed had been deafening, and I'd fallen a little bit more in love with my wife, right there in the middle of a conversation about charitable endowments. The best part of this whole transformation, both mine and Madison's, was watching people who dismissed us completely now hang on our every word like we were dispensing wisdom from on high. Instead of just being regular people who happened to be good at our jobs, we'd become the couple that people wanted to network with, wanted to be seen talking to, wanted to include in their social circles, not because they liked us, but because we'd become useful to them. And every single time someone called me Mr. Morgan with that reverence in their voice, every time Paula Whitmore had to grit her teeth and be polite to me at a corporate function, every time Robert Whitmore asked for my advice on business decisions like I was some kind of oracle instead of just a guy who read his emails and showed up to meetings, I thought about that dinner party. I thought about being called a fat pig. I thought about Trent not even bothering to remember my name. I thought about sitting at that table feeling invisible except when someone needed bread passed. And then I'd smile. Because respect, real respect, not the fake kind that comes from politeness, isn't something you can demand. It's something you earn by being so undeniably competent that people have no choice but to acknowledge it, even if that acknowledgement tastes like defeat in their mouths. Looking back on this whole situation, and I mean really looking back, not just the Instagram-filtered version where everything seems meaningful and poetic, I realized that night at the Whitmore estate was one of those turning points that you don't recognize as a turning point until you're standing on the other side of it, wondering how the hell you got from point A to point B without getting whiplash from the velocity of change. 6 months ago, I was just some guy in logistics who showed up to work, did his job, and went home to his modest apartment without causing any significant ripples in anyone's universe. Now I'm the guy who signs paychecks for people who used to think I wasn't worth remembering the name of. Trent's still in Nebraska, by the way, in case you were wondering. He sends me emails now. Polite, professional emails that read like they were written by someone who's had their ego surgically removed and replaced with corporate compliance training. Hope this finds you well, Mr. Morgan. Per our last discussion, Mr. Morgan. Thank you for your consideration, Mr. Morgan. Every single one is a little monument to how far we've both come. Except I went up and he went sideways into the middle of America where the corn grows tall and the career prospects grow. Well, they probably stay about the same. Honestly, his performance reviews have actually improved, which surprised me more than anyone. Turns out, when you remove someone from their safety net of family connections and force them to actually work for their paycheck, they either sink or learn to swim. Trent chose swimming, probably because the alternative was admitting defeat to his entire family and social circle. And rich people would rather develop actual competence than face that level of humiliation. Who knew that all it took to make him a functional employee was 3 states of distance, and the constant awareness that his boss was the guy his family had insulted at dinner? The Whitmore family gatherings, from what Madison tells me through Haley's increasingly friendly text messages. Yeah, they're friendly now. Funny how that works, have undergone a complete reformation. Apparently, there's now a strict no insulting people based on their appearance or perceived social status rule that Paula instituted after the board of directors made it very clear that losing me as a consultant would be financially devastating. It's amazing how quickly people develop morals when their money's on the line. Paula herself has become almost tolerable. She invited us to her summer garden party last month, which we declined because we'd rather do literally anything else. But the invitation was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Caleb Morgan with a handwritten note that said, "Your presence would be an honor." An honor from the woman who called me a pig. I kept that invitation in my desk drawer, just as a reminder that karma doesn't always come fast. But when it comes with receipts and a forwarding address. Robert still calls me for business advice at least twice a week. And honestly, I've started to not hate him. He's one of those guys who was born into wealth and never questioned it. But he's at least willing to learn and adapt, which is more than you can say for most people in his tax bracket. Plus, he actually listens when I talk, which is a low bar, but one that surprisingly few executives clear. Madison and I moved into an actual house 3 months ago, by the way. Nothing crazy. We're not Whitmore level or anything. But it's got a yard and a guest room and one of those kitchens where you can actually move around without bumping into appliances. We host dinners now, our own dinners with our own friends. And nobody calls anybody a pig, which really shouldn't be a high standard. But apparently, it is. The thing about this whole experience that keeps coming back to me, though, is how easily it could have gone differently. If I'd actually been what they assumed I was, just some regular guy with no power, no leverage, no ability to affect their comfortable lives. That dinner party would have just been another story about rich people being terrible and getting away with it, because that's what rich people do. But the universe, in its infinite wisdom and questionable sense of humor, had set up this perfect storm of dramatic irony, where the person they'd chosen to mock was actually the person who held their professional future in his hands. So if anyone ever calls you a pig, or dismisses you, or treats you like you're not worth the oxygen you're breathing, just smile. Smile, and remember that life is long. Power dynamics shift. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually they might just find themselves sitting across a desk from you, begging for your approval on their performance review. And when that day comes, you'll get to decide whether to serve them dinner or humble pie. Me, I served both, medium rare, with a side of Nebraska. And honestly, it tasted pretty damn good. Hit that subscribe button right now. Lastly, download your audiobook titled Brutal Cheating Stories That Shock the World by clicking the link in the pinned comment.